All right, welcome back to Roundtable 101. We got a packed panel. We got an all-star panel here tonight. As always, we have D-Style Boxing in the house. We have one of the best boxing journalists, Gabriel Montoya, has joined us with pleasure to have him back. We have Lukey from Lukey Boxing, and we have his book here. I want to plug that book, so I have the link in the description box if you guys want to purchase his book. And we have Easy Raw joining us for the first time. Welcome, brother.
Thank you.
And we have UK's finest Base the Kid back with us once again. Obviously, the hot topic is going to be this Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. fight that was canceled. I got to ask the panel, do you believe this was the right thing? And where did this go wrong? With the way this was handled, are you guys happy with the way this was handled? Are you happy that the fight was canceled? Do you think the right decision was made? Gabe, we'll start with you.
I think absolutely the right decision was made. I think what went down proved a few things. The boxing, the more time moves forward, the more things stay absolutely the same. If you think about, just think back to the origins of VADA. And, I broke those first two stories, Lamont Peterson and Berto. And I don't bring that to humble brag. It's just that these lessons kind of keep coming back because the system hasn't changed enough to protect the fighters. And I sat on those positives, waiting for them to do something with the B sample before, so I could kind of confirm that it was real. That's, kind of where I was in my knowledge base at the time. About 2 weeks for both of them. And here we are. Chris Eubank Sr. 2 weeks ago or so was saying, hey, man, I think we shouldn't do this fight. And everybody was like, oh, he's just being crazy. But what we found out afterwards is that 2 weeks ago is when everyone knew that it was positive, and they probably should have told the public. So what we learned is that journalism mattered because there was a reporter that outed this in the 11th hour, and that's really what got the fight stopped. It forced the BBOC to take some action when they should have taken it 2 weeks ago. The rules should be you test positive before a fight. End of story. Because this isn't a drug that Clomid or clomiphene, where you can have a little bit in your system. It's I believe it's a qualitative test, meaning if you have it in your system, you're positive. That's it. You're not allowed to have this. It's an illegal drug for you to be using. So I think everything went kind of as it should. And the promoters, again, are acting exactly how Richard Schaefer was. I mean, Eddie Hearn's just a politer version or a more polite version of Richard Schaefer. But he uses all the same terms. It's just an adverse finding. Doggy tested positive for a drug that he's not allowed to have. And they're kind of putting all the blame on the BBOC because it wasn't a UCAD test that he failed. It was a VADA test. And UCAD and BBOC don't really acknowledge VADA. But it's been 10 to 12 years now. I think we should trust VADA and their track record. It's all smoke and mirrors from Eddie. So, fight should have been canceled.
Funny you say you mentioned the word adverse, and you hear people try to minimize the word adverse. Adverse is not a positive word; it's a negative word. It's if you go to a doctor and he says he's found something adverse with anything regarding your medical records, you're going to be concerned.
And also, trace it only was trace amounts. Yeah, because it's a urine sample, dude. It's not like they found a pill in his mouth.
Exactly.
You have to take it and metabolize it. Eddie's just clouding the issue as Eddie does.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions afterwards, Gabe, but I'm going to go around the panel and just get their takes on this. Lukey, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? Do you think the right decision was made?
I mean, if we're just looking at it, of course the right decision was made because this is the same drug Brock Lesnar was caught with, Manny Ramirez, and an NFL player, Roger Mathis. But let's not act like this wasn't a circus first and foremost. We had a young man moving up from 47 to 57 and a guy coming down to 57 based on past history and entertainment purposes. If you go to the circus, don't be surprised if you see some clowns. This was based around greed. This was based around entertainment. So this was kind of like the cherry on top, just seeing the negligence. This fight was money first. That was the whole purpose of it. And I think the sad thing was that the fighters on the undercard, Ellie Scottney went and said this today. they don't get to have a say in any of this. So what I think the sad part is Ben shouldn't fight because he made a mistake. And we never, as boxing, we never hear someone say, Paulie Malignaggi said this, and I agree with Paulie. We never hear the guy that goes, you know what? It was a close fight. Maybe I took something because I didn't know if I could win. It's always some type of circumstance. Man, I was trying to have a kid. Man, it's this and that. You wouldn't believe how unlucky I am. And that's the other thing. There's never really any consequence of super merit when people get caught. So it never really forces fighters to think about it. At least to me, the consequences for cheating in this sport don't outweigh the effect it can possibly have. And that's dramatically unfortunate. My heart goes out to the undercard fighters who had planned vacations, who were planning on doing stuff with the money, and I hope they get paid. But that's who I think the real unfortunate story is that the undercard fighters don't get a chance to compete and build their record.
Gotcha. Easy, Rob. What do you think of this, man? What's your take?
I think the decision was bad for my weekend, but for boxing it was great. It was a good decision for the boxing. My weekend it suffers, right? I need about 3 to 4 cards every weekend to happen. When you cancel one, I don't like that. I need multiple screens at all time. Of course, I think it was a good decision. Of course, this fight shouldn't have went on. He failed the test. Now, whether they get suspended or they just delay it, postpone, we got to see how that goes. I do think that boxing fans are very used to just a negative result. I think a positive result happened here. Now, a positive result as in the right thing happened, and people aren't used to it. So it's almost to the point to where we don't know how to handle the right thing happening in boxing. But the right thing happened to this. And the one thing with Eddie Hearn, I understand that he flipped it whatever way he wants to flip it. I think people expect too much from these promoters. They expect more from the promoter than they do their own pastor. It's the strangest thing. He's a promoter. He's not a deflator. Okay, he's going to promote. He's going to spin this everywhere he wants. Now, Eddie Hearn talks too much. I'll give you that. He talks way too much. And if you talk enough, and anyone that does a podcast, knows you talk enough, you go back, look back a year and a half, you're like, wait, I said that? Yes, it's going to happen. He says so much to flip things on their head that, yes, you're going to have a point of view that doesn't match what you're saying today. I don't know why people expect promoters to do anything different. He's just doing his job. But honestly, I'm not saying I like him or don't like him. I just know he's just doing his job. I know what to expect from him. But I think the right thing happened in boxing.
Got you. Base, you're over in the UK, in the thick of it. What's the general consensus over there?
The general consensus is that it was the right thing for it to, not go ahead. But you know what? My unpopular opinion, I actually think it should have. 2 reasons. Number one, because from all reports that we've had, and obviously we can only go by what's being said, but both the promoters, Chris Eubank Jr., all of them said, we want this fight. We want to still do the fight. Now, yeah, that could be very money motivated. Cool. But the guy who is going to now be in the negative advantage or, the negative position twice with, rehydration clause, coming down 3 pounds and possibly fighting a dirty fighter. And I say possibly because, we don't know exactly. But he said, I still want to take this fight. Still want to fight him. So at that point, you say, well, okay, let him sign an indemnity waiver or something like that to say, well, if anything happens, like you asked for this. That's first thing. Second, which is actually factual, Varda was paid for, obviously, by Eddie, Kayla Sowland, and I guess the boxers as additions to UCAD, but the BBBOC don't recognize anything that Varda does. They will might take it under advisement, but they recognize UCAD, and UCAD didn't find anything in all the tests that they done. So at that point, they've not suspended him and they've not accused him. He's not even on, he's not even an accusation from them. Oh, well, we're arresting you on suspicion. So he's not suspended. They've got no case against him, but they're just not sanctioning this fight. And then subsequently, that's then ruined, as you guys have said, it's ruined the entire undercard. All people who are depending on that money, it's ruined it for people who've traveled in, spent a lot of money, bought plane tickets, booked hotels that you can't get refunds on. There's a lot going on there. So while I won't argue with anyone who doesn't think it shouldn't go ahead, cool. I'm not gonna say anything with regards to that, but I do think that at the time of which it's taken place, and the fact that by the bylaws of the BBBOC and what they adhere to, there's no reason for them to have not sanctioned it. Now, whether the public then decided to boycott afterwards is a totally different matter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to Gabe about some of those points you made. So I want to hear his take on that. D-Style Boxing, what are your thoughts on this whole situation, and do you think the right thing was done?
Look, and that's the right question. Like, was the right thing done? The answer is yes. I hear a lot of polls out there like, do you like the fact that the fight was canceled? Like, well, no one's happy that the fight was canceled. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no one's pro the fight getting canceled. And I do feel like boxing fans this is just my opinion. And I know I've talked to you about this, Joe, and I made a video about it yesterday on my channel. A lot of boxing fans have a stance on this that's due to their own inconvenience, right? Like, and their own impatience. Because I feel inconvenience that a fight I wanted to see is getting canceled because the fighter got caught. Because I feel inconvenience that a fight I want to see can't happen because a certain fighter doesn't want to agree to drug testing. Because it's an inconvenience to what I want to see as a fight fan, right? In some cases, I don't want drug testing. No drug testing. Don't do it. That's the position a lot of boxing fans have, quite frankly, and it's again due to their own inconvenience and their own impatience, right? Instead of holding the athletes accountable, instead of saying, I'm not happy that this fight got canceled, and you know what? This is the fault of, Conor Benn. Conor Benn got busted. Conor Benn did something that he himself lectured Miller about, right after he got busted against Joshua, saying, how could he do that? I mean, you're going to ruin his big moment, by getting busted, And in Eddie Hearn's own words, it depends when you ask Eddie Hearn, but in Eddie Hearn's own words, hey, I mean, you can't, why agree to VADA testing? Why do the VADA testing if you're not going to adhere to it? If it's not going to matter in the end, why do it? Now, one thing Easy Raw Boxing said is if we all talk long enough, eventually we're going to say things that it is true that we're going to have, some inconsistencies. But I'm not going to say that beer is water and water is beer. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say night is day and day is night. And that's literally like Eddie Hearn is saying two completely opposite things. Like completely opposite. Like I've been talking boxing on here for 10 years. I've never said something that night and day. And people, you go back to and I've never gone like that. And I've been talking about it longer than Eddie Hearn. All right. So all I'm saying is, yes, of course, promoters are going to be promoters. This is not unique to Eddie Hearn whatsoever, but we still have to hold promoters accountable when they say things that are not consistent, right? Because the results happen. And in my opinion, I do think public pressure is one of the reasons why this fight's not continuing. But those are my thoughts on it.
Mighty Max, welcome. What are your thoughts on this whole situation, and do you think the right decision was made?
It's a shame for fans this fight isn't happening, but I have a very simple take on this. Many fighters, and I'm not going to point out any particular name, are clearly on roids of some capacity, but the bigger question is who gets caught. And in this situation, Conor Benn got caught. I doubt that Eubank isn't on something as well, as I believe most fighters are on something. So honestly, I'm pretty indifferent about it. Yeah, if he gets caught, it would look bad for them to continue to fight going ahead. But I don't think Chris Eubank's health was at risk due to Conor Benn being on roids. I don't think it really mattered much. This is probably the fourth, maybe fifth time in a row where Ben has been on something, but the first time he actually got caught being on something. So we have to make a differential between, should we just let all fights continue and not worry about steroids, or should we pretend that when a fighter gets caught, he's, oh my goodness, he got caught on steroids. I mean, the amount of fighters that don't get caught on steroids, it's absolutely insane. And even WADA said multiple times that they only catch about 2% of the fighters that they test. The 2% of fighters that are on steroids, that they actually catch. So a lot of fighters aren't being caught either way. So I'm pretty indifferent about the fight not happening. Honestly, I feel like it's not a fighter being caught on steroids isn't as big of a deal as people act. But honestly, in this situation, this circumstance, it would look kind of suspect if a fighter publicly caught on steroids to let the fight continue. But personally, I don't really make that big of a deal if a fighter gets caught.
Yeah. So Gabe, I want to circle back here now. One question I have for you is, because every time we hear someone has an adverse finding or trace amount. So anytime someone fails a PD test, regardless of what the drug is, everyone's like, suspend this guy. This guy's this guy's that. And just like any other drug, like there's different drugs. Like if you get caught with marijuana, it's not the same as getting caught with cocaine. So do
Right.
you think there should be like a uniform punishment regardless of what the drug is, or do you think it should be looked at on a case-by-case basis depending upon what the drug the fighter tested positive for?
Yes, because I think every positive is a different story, even if they're all trying to do the same thing. You know, could be a young guy that doesn't have a lot of powers, trying to gain an edge, try to become special. Could be an old guy trying to extend his career. Yeah, EPO is a totally different thing than taking testosterone. You know, you're looking at a drug that increases red blood cell count, so you have more endurance, like Shane Mosley took when he was with Balco during the De La Hoya rematch. Jeremy Giambi is actually another athlete that took Clomid, another, I believe, a Balco guy. So, you know, yeah. But, you know, it's interesting, like today, you know, Joe Biden, the president of the U.S., said they're going to waive sentences for people that got caught with weed, like federal possession. Yeah. You know, these things change over time, but like if you look at the U.S. drug war, right, as a model for, say, the combat sports drug war, putting people in jail longer hasn't been a deterrent. Drugs are cheaper and more widespread and easier to get than ever before. So I don't think that's really the thing, because everybody thinks, you know, particularly in sports, everybody thinks they're special, that they're not going to get caught. So I don't think that's the deterrent. I think right now we have to expand on the framework that we have, like the WBC's VADA clean boxing program. To be in the top 15 of the WBC, you got to be ranked, right? You got to be, you know, eligible to be tested year-round by VADA in order to be ranked by the WBC. That just means you're eligible. You may, with their budget, get tested once in a year. So now you know if you got tested once or especially twice, you're not going to get tested again unless you agree to training camp testing with a fight. So you're free to dope if you're a doper, and you can evade things. We need to expand that somehow through the rest of the sanctioning bodies, the three that aren't a part of it, get a bigger budget and start testing people more often. If everybody, this is my theory, if you're tested 6 times to 8 times a year, there's never really a quadrant in the year where you can like safely feel like you can dope. You know, maybe you're doing something that clears fast, like an EPO, but still, I think it actually becomes a deterrent at that point, because I don't think longer suspensions are so far. So, you know, we haven't really seen anybody go, you know, obviously positives have kept happening, you know, at a high level. And to what Mighty Max was saying, I think we're barely scratching the surface of who they're catching. But, you know, yeah, so to me, you know, it is, suspension should be different based on the drug. But I think the overall things, we just need to expand how we're trying to catch people. And then and also, like, this is the difference between VADA and everybody else. VADA uses the 2 most effective drug tests for probably the 2 top drugs, testosterone and EPO. They use those in their screeners on every sample that they take. And that's why they catch people more often. They also test year-round, like the whole panel. There's no out-of-competition allowed drugs with VADA. Whereas with like WADA and USADA, you can be doing stimulants all through the year, and there's certain drugs you can kind of fudge it. And so I think we just need to go to a more strict model if we're going to do this. Sort of like you said about Eddie Hearn, you're either for drug testing or you're not, man. It can't just be when the other guy tests positive. Yeah. He acts just like Richard Schaefer in those early days of VADA, which they didn't want to do because they didn't control the B sample with VADA.
Yeah. So if Conor Benn doesn't get suspended, and I guess it's a slippery slope because technically the way the BBC works is they go by UCAD, but it was a very unique situation with Canelo Alvarez because again, the Las Vegas Commission reserved the right to make the decision whether or not they wanted to suspend Canelo Alvarez or not. So they used VADA's testing, and they looked at that and as a means to make a decision. Now, this whole thing with the BBC, could they look at this or should they look at this and I don't know the exact. I'll have to maybe defer to base on this, but could they make a decision and just say, well, we're going to take a look at this VADA test or whatever and investigate this VADA test, and should they step in and impose some type of suspension?
Yeah, I think. Well, here's the thing: has anybody heard the BBOC say we don't recognize VADA, or is that just Eddie Hearn saying that, and people are buying that narrative?
What I'm suspecting, and I could be wrong here, it's just like the Las Vegas Commission. They can look at the VADA test and they have the final say on what they want to do. I suspect possibly the BBC is in a similar. I don't think there's anything that's in writing that the BBC cannot use a VADA test as a means to suspend a fighter. I can't fathom that. So I think that's maybe a little bit of word salad from Eddie Hearn, in my opinion.
Right. And I also think, UCAD probably uses the same WADA accredited lab that VADA does in Europe. There are only so many of them.
Yeah, to my knowledge, I think they do.
Yeah. So I think at this point, there's just no way that BBOC could look at this drug, Clomid or clomiphene, which is, I believe it's, it's called an estrogen blocker.
Yeah, it's an estrogen blocker.
It helps to boost your testosterone. And when bodybuilders use it is at the end of a cycle. They've been doing anabolic steroids, which is kind of a synthetic testosterone, right? So your body floods. To answer in the chat, no, VADA is not the Victor Conte company. He has a lot of fighters that go there, but that's an aside. I can go into depth on that if they need. But clomiphene shuts down by doing anabolic steroids, your body stops making testosterone, right? So then it starts kicking out because you've got all this extra testosterone synthetically. Your body's making out more estrogen. That's why guys get gyno or like man boobs, right?
The balls shrink too.
Right. So Clomid helps to kind of block that estrogen production. And then that in turn, that signal reboosts your testosterone again. So that's what we saw is either he was trying to boost his testosterone by using this in the short term, or he was finishing off a cycle of some other drug. What I think they should do with him is have him do 365 VADA testing for a year, not just be eligible, but like 12 tests in a year. And then on top of that, do the hair follicle test. I know his head, I think, is shaved, but it's better to get it off body hair because it doesn't, it holds it better, apparently. You can do a long-term drug test. You get up to 6 months to like a year and see if there's long-term drug testing. Drug use in the hair follicle. Canelo did that after testing positive. Lucas Brown did first. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, and the funny thing is too, some of these people that test positive for this are saying that, I took it because I wanted to have a kid, because supposedly this could help with sperm production as well. So there's all type, but it hasn't been proven. It hasn't really been tested on men for that, but that perception is out there. But it is what it is. But we'll see how it plays out. But I think, in my opinion, if Conor Benn doesn't get suspended, I think it's going to be a bad look, and I think there's going to be a lot of negative backlash, and there's no way to put a happy face on this one.
No, I think they have to recognize the results and suspend him. But they might do a thing where it's like losing the fight. I think the window for the fight has lost. I don't think Eubank Jr. comes down to 157 again, and I think if you're Benn's people, you're like, you know what, man, we're not going to 160. Let's just move past the fight.
Right, guys, just to let you know, I'm on the BBBOC rules and regulations for anti-doping and whatnot. So they say that they follow UCAD as their rules. Obviously UCAD is adhered by the WADA code. So because WADA is obviously voluntary, it's like a voluntary supplementary service. It's not. I guess they don't have to adhere to it, but I think if they could, but I think the only way that they will is on the evidence of the B sample, because that still hasn't been tested and cleared yet. So once that happens, then they'll look at it and say, okay, let's investigate this. But at this particular time, they're saying, well, there's no violation that's taken place. That's the wording.
This is just to add on to something. there that UCAD is a WADA accredited anti-doping agency. VADA isn't, but it's not because they're lesser. It's because all the things I mentioned, they do the testing panel all year round. And they also don't test for THC. They never have. And so they're not WADA. They don't go by WADA's guidelines. In fact, they're looser in that regard and stricter in others.
Yeah, it's kind of like, let's say some police officers beat the shit out of some dude in the middle of the street, and nobody saw it until he said, she said, hey, well, my body cams didn't catch anything. The body cams weren't working. But then I caught it on my phone, though, and I filmed it. So we could see that they beat up that dude. Right? They can't say the court, like it's like the court saying, yeah, but it wasn't the official, body cams that caught it though. Your phone isn't an official government phone, so I don't know. We don't need to take that as evidence. Like that's how I feel about this. Like the dude had something in the system. That is a fact. Like you know what I mean? And you have to
not going to say anything different.
Well, the problem with this thing is the way Eddie Hearn is presenting it. Like UCAD. It's etched in stone that the BBC is gonna go exactly with the UCAD test and totally just disregard the VADA test. If they're gonna do a proper investigation, then I would assume very strongly that they're gonna have to go back and research those VADA tests and everything, and that's gonna have to be part of the investigation. I just can't see an investigation taking place without that being involved.
And there's questions like I was watching the coverage today. I did an interview with Seconds Out earlier. So I was kind of watching it like everybody was, as it was breaking and watching what he was saying. And he's saying, well, UCAD tested him and he tested negative. Okay, well, what days did they test him? And what did they test him for? Did they test him for clomiphene in that panel or was it something else?
Yeah.
It's like he kind of planted narrative. They didn't take a single question at that press conference. That's how you know they don't want you punching holes in what Eddie says.
I mean, everyone's taken blood tests before. You're going for a specific blood test. You get they have the little vial and they put on the paper and they stick it to the thing exactly what you're being tested for. So if he, like you said, if he wasn't being tested for that, then they weren't looking for it. They're not going to find it. So that's just common sense. One last one for you, Gabe, that I've always wanted to ask you, because we hear the safety of the fighter, right? Mm-hmm. But when you look at other things that go on in boxing, like these ridiculous weight cuts, and you see fighters rehydrate 20 pounds going in the ring with the guy that they're significantly heavier than, you see mismatches like, Danny Garcia fighting a Rod Salka, some of those fights that should never be sanctioned. Mayweather fighting McGregor, who never had a pro fight. To me, those things are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than PED use, but we never hear people really speak out. We hear them criticize those things and speak out, but we never hear them talk about safety or how dangerous those things are in comparison to the PEDs. In your opinion, what do you think is more dangerous, those things that I mentioned or the PEDs? Because we have evidence that can prove that those things cause negative results and in some cases fatalities. But we don't know if anyone killed someone we do know that Fernando Vargas was on PEDs when he fought De La Hoya and he lost. James Toney, so I'm not trying to advocate for the use of PEDs. Everyone has their stance on it, but everyone says, oh, well, someone can die in there. But anyone can die. I mean, people are taking punches to the head. You can't try to say this. You can't ever make this sport be safe 100%. Like you can't try to say, oh, well, we're trying to make this sport safe. It's never going to be safe punching someone in the head 100 times in a 36-minute time frame. So are those things just as dangerous, if not more? What is your opinion on that? I always wanted to ask you that.
I think that was like my gateway to writing about drugs in the sport was a column I used to write for Max Boxing, and I started doing it again on Substack earlier this year, called the Mismatch Report. And I would just go through all the cards in my area or in the country after a while, and I would look for all those mismatches where like a prospect's facing a guy that's been on like a 10-fight losing streak, just professional opponents, dudes that have been knocked out within the last year, and haven't got a proper suspension or they go to another state. And all these kind of glorified tough man matches, the Jake Paul stuff. It's kind of part and parcel of the sport, and it is the obvious blight that we could fix. But I think most news media, this is why I got into the business in the first place, was it's too reactive for my taste. And I wanted to be a proactive reporter, writing about some things before they happen. I wrote 25 pieces about drugs in the sport before I ever caught my first positive story, with Lamont Peterson. I think that's kind of what we need to be doing as a media, just as media across the board, from the YouTube guys to the people that are on the beat and just pure writers. And I think too, what you were talking about, the weight cutting, I've always felt that that's the gateway to all the other PEDs. Dudes take things to make that weight, or even just tricking out your body through the hot bath method or whatever, dropping 10 pounds or 12 pounds and then blowing back up in 36 hours. That's terrible for you. And it shuts down your endocrine system and does things to it that we don't fully understand. Boxing is rife with junk science, and that particular practice, I think, is particularly barbaric and needs to change. So I think, I would do, if I was really trying to write the whole system, would be to get people to always be within 5 pounds of their weight. So they only drop in that 5. You'd see a lot of guys shift. And I think the endocrine systems would last, and they'd be better hydrated. You'd get better fights, and their brains would be more protected when they're in there. And I think that would kind of feed into the more testing and just better overall fighter health. Get them a damn healthcare system too while we're at it.
These guys are destroying their adrenal glands. That's why I was never for the day before weigh-ins. I think if you go back to the same day weigh-ins, I think people will fight at their right weight class, and you won't have this false sense of security that I can get it all back in 36 hours, because it's not true. It's not science fact based. It's really not. So. All right, let's move on to the next one. Another crazy topic, Fury Joshua. We've been hearing about this for the last couple weeks, and I have to say, I hate playing the blame game, but we always have to. It always comes back to it, playing the blame game. Whose fault is this? Did both fighters really want the fight, and did the promoters really want the fight? Was this all just for clout, just for publicity, just for show? Start with you, Mighty Max. Who's to blame in this situation?
Well, if anyone's getting the blame, because we all kind of knew deep down this fight wasn't going to happen. I don't know why people were high on it actually happening. If anyone's getting the blame, it's 100% Tyson Fury. I mean, this guy had no intent of fighting Anthony Joshua. He has no intent of fighting Alexander Usyk. This is a guy that I'm surprised he didn't retire after Usyk beat AJ, because we knew he would never fight Usyk. AJ agreed to every single term he asked, which were all ridiculous terms. December 3rd, after AJ fought, late September or late August, barely a 3-month layoff. Then he tells him where to fight and all the splits and all this. AJ agrees to all of it. Eddie Hearn agrees to all of it. And yet after all of that, Tyson Fury once again makes some BS call out to Derek Chisora, Manuel Char, Joe Joyce. This guy Tyson Fury, man, he's about to fight 5 guys in one night. I mean, this is some all-time great stuff. He's going to fight Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, Joe Joyce, Manuel Char, and Derek Chisora all in one night. I mean,
Texas death match. The Texas death match.
Of course, man. I mean, I think as fans, we'd all love to see Tyson Fury fight all those guys in one night. It's a guaranteed loss for Fury.
Don't forget Ngannou.
What was that?
Ngannou, don't forget him.
Oh, yeah, Ngannou as well. 4th Deontay Wilder fight. This guy wants to fight everyone, and I'm really sick of Tyson Fury's antics. Honestly, someone made a tweet on Twitter saying, if boxing can get rid of one fighter, who would I choose? I automatically chose Tyson Fury. Got like 400 likes because everyone agrees with me. No one wants Tyson Fury in the sport. He's a waste of energy. He's a waste of space. And honestly, I think all of us, to be honest, if we could go back in time, would have had Wilder knock Fury out. I'm not even a fan of Wilder, but if I could go back in time, I would have had Wilder win that fight. Because, yeah, Wilder wasn't always fighting the top guys, but at least he wasn't playing mind games with his own fans and calling out 20 guys in one night. I'm very fed up with Tyson Fury's antics. I've had enough of it, honestly.
CP, this is the greatest panelist you've ever brought on. This is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, D-Style, what are your thoughts? Who's to blame in this? You co-signing with Mighty Max?
Tyson Fury's to blame. He's the reigning heavyweight champion. He's calling out a dude coming off 2 straight losses. That's who he wants to fight. You want me to be impressed? And not only that, he just had a grueling fight just recently. And then you can't even agree like late December. It has to be early December. It had to be in November or whatever. This shit's insane. This is 100% Tyson Fury. All right. And I'm not going to run interference for Tyson Fury. Sorry. That's what I got.
Gotcha. Base, once again, you're over in the UK, man. What's the consensus? Who are they blaming for this fight not happening?
Well, the sensible people are just like D-Style and Mighty Max. As Tyson Fury never wanted it. It was a PR stunt from the beginning, which backfired because they never expected it to be accepted. All of the quote unquote sanctions and the deadlines and all of that just showed you, well, if you had any sense, you're going to know that Anthony Joshua isn't going to be able to sign a contract in the same standard time that maybe a regular no-name, no profiled opponent is going to be able to, just due to all the legal implications and all the commercial deals, which is the only reason you called him out in the first place, because you know that there's no tune-up fight that you can make, not even the undisputed fight you can make, that generates you anywhere near the kind of money that Anthony Joshua does, even coming off of 2 losses. But I've always maintained, and a lot of people seem to miss this, in the very first call-out video, Tyson Fury, and this may not be the exact words, but this is basically, he said, before I tell you who I'm fighting next, I have to do this, and then mentions Anthony Joshua's name. Now, why does he have to do that? Because you don't get traction without mentioning Anthony Joshua's name. It's literally there in his wording, but a lot of people seem to, they don't seem to get that part. And I've watched that video many times just to double check that I'm not, creating some kind of false narrative. Now, as obviously D-Style said, the Mighty Max said, he's literally out there. Okay, Joshua, hurry up, sign it today, knowing that that's not going to happen. Okay, you got 2 more days, sign it now. Oh, wait, Manuel Char, well, you're a real man because you call out people when you want to fight. All of this stuff, Derek Chisora at the Joseph Parker and Joe Joyce fight, because I was there, I saw all of that thing happening. I'm just like, okay, all of this is it's the Tyson Fury show, just trying to gain traction off of Anthony Joshua, trying to make people work to unrealistic deadlines that you don't even have the power to control. Let's be honest. Now you could maybe say that Joshua's team maybe was stalling a little bit in terms of the turnarounds of the contract. Everyone's like, oh, well, they had the contract for 14 days. No, but even if they did technically have the contract for 14 days, you're like Frank Warren and Queensbury went on the radio and admitted that we're taking some time off because of the Queen's passing. So how are you claiming that it's still 14 days when you know everything stopped in the country for about 3 to 5? There's just so many things that on both, there is obviously stuff on Eddie's side where you could say, yeah, you maybe not handling this the best on your part, but then on the other side, there's just so many other inconsistencies and so many people can see what's gone on. It's surprising that anyone even has has this level of delusion to believe that Tyson's team is in the right. I don't get it, but you know what? That's them, and good health to them. I hope they get the help they need.
Yeah, Lukey, I know you don't like getting involved in the politics of boxing, but what is your take on this? Who do you think's in the wrong here?
I was looking up Irish golf, so you got me. Now, I don't know. I think it's social media, right? Really famous people just say stuff, so then people write stories about them, and they go, "Oh my God, this famous guy said something about this other famous guy, and heaven forbid we actually do it the way we really do it, behind closed doors and do deals." No, let me go to my favorite reporter, and then I'll say what I said, and then I'll say something kind of cheeky, and then that'll be a story, and then someone will counteract that, and then before we know it, we get 2 terrible fights, and they're both wrong, right? Both, whoever you like more, whether you like Joshua or whether you like Fury, the other guy's the bad guy, right? That's kind of boxing 101 in a nutshell, right? It's just one of these things where Fury, I think for me, the big standout is Fury's an interesting guy because he's top 5, top 8, top 12 all-time heavyweight kind of guy. Dimensions, he could finish out and that could not be true, but I mean, that's where he's kind of trending. And talk to guys like Bruce Trampler and Lee Samuels. They think very highly of Fury, right? And I respect those guys. They've been around boxing a real long time. But boy, do people hate Fury. You know, it's kind of interesting the reaction Fury gets from people. I think that's my big takeaway is I just don't listen to these guys. I don't really care. I didn't ever expect them to fight. Like if they're going to fight, it's going to be when one of them loses and they have to fight out of desperation. So I just didn't pay attention. But I think the interesting thing for me is how much people dislike Fury is just kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. D-Style Boxing says it's Fury's fault. And yeah, we know that's your stance. Easy Raw, who do you blame here?
I think, yes, it's Fury. I'm agree with that. But I'm just surprised that when Fury wakes up, he chooses a lie every day. Not one day, not 1 week, not 1 month. He chooses a lie every day, and everyone falls for it. Every day, there's a panel just like here, what we're having a conversation whether Fury's going to do this or do that. If he said he's going to run for president tomorrow, people would debate and say, we never really had a gypsy president. He literally controls the media, whatever he lies. So yes, of course he was lying. The fight was never going to happen. The only thing Joshua did correctly was call his bluff because Joshua was never going to take that fight either. That's the thing is that people are acting like if Joshua was really going to take this fight, he was never going to take that fight. The DAZN just signed him to a deal and they didn't get paid off the last fight. So they need 3 fights that he can win. They don't need to cash him out now. They need to get 3 fights with him and then they could start talking a fight like this. They were never going to take this fight. They were just smart enough to know Fury was lying. And I don't know why people keep falling for it, but he lies every day. He stays in the, it's like he stays popular by it just because people either love you or hate you. And everybody seems to hate him, like Lukey was saying. So I guess it's working. But yeah, that's it. He's to blame, yes, because he's lying about everything. But Joshua just called it. He wasn't going to fight him either.
Yeah. Gabe, what do you think of this whole thing, man? Have you been following this and what are your thoughts?
I kind of agree with Mighty Max. I'm pretty tired of Fury. He makes me glad I'm not a boxing writer anymore because I wouldn't have to transcribe his long bullshit screeds. It would just take forever, and it's not going anywhere. This fight, I think he was blathering on, and he tried to control the narrative, try to be the top dog, and catch AJ in a moment of weakness, and I think AJ called his bluff. And maybe he ends up screwing himself because it does feel like a letdown fighting Shar, which I think, after all the fights he's given us and the tough fights he's had, he's due for a mandatory or for, a voluntary that's a little bit of a gimme. But the thing I'm curious about with him is, and I don't know if anybody's asked him, I haven't paid that much attention, is, because the DOJ announced that a bunch of something like 300 people connected to the Daniel Kinahan crime family are no longer allowed in the U.S. Is Tyson Fury one of them? Is he going to fight in the U.S. ever again?
We don't know, but he was blocked for recently for coming to the U.S. But I don't know if that's indefinite or if there's a time frame on that or not. I don't know, but in the short term, he was blocked.
Anybody that has access to him is a clown if they don't ask him that question.
Well, someone did ask him, and you know what his reply was? It's none of your business. So that's why I could never
follow up to that. That's better. It's like, no, man, actually, it's a matter of national security. I'm a part of this nation. It is my business.
That's a good comeback. Not many people would say that, but that's the reason why I'm so glad I don't have to do this as a job. You know what I mean? That I don't rely on this for a main source of income because it's just a tough. You're sitting there talking to a fighter, and you're asking him a question, and that he's totally lying and bullshitting to you. But in order to keep you can call him out, but then again, once you call him out, the interview's over. So it's it's almost like you got to kind of play along for it. It's a slippery.
There's a fine line between being a reporter and being a guy standing there with a microphone.
Yeah,
and being a mouthpiece for somebody. I wasn't always great at doing it nicely, but it's like I said in the Seconds Out interview today, that reporters have to remember, you can be friendly, but these guys aren't your friends. Just because you have access to them, trust me, the minute you have a negative story to write about them, they will throw you under the bus.
It's like the fight hype dude. He never asked Floyd a follow up. He just grunted and agreed. Yeah, Floyd. Yeah, that's right. Okay,
and you got to press. I mean, that's a perfect example, man, of Floyd, Mr. Remember when they were doing drug testing for all their fighters, 365? That's what Ellerby said.
Yeah.
Never happened, and they don't even do drug testing in the PBC. When they do, it's VADA testing.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
I'm just glad this isn't my job, because it's
Dude.
you ask one question someone doesn't like, and then and boom, you're done. You can't go to fights anymore. You don't get access. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's good to be free. I'll tell you that.
Luki made a great point. I think that the Fury thing is the industry has changed. That wasn't really a story. You know what I mean? The AJ Fury thing. It shouldn't have been what it was, because fights like that don't get negotiated on YouTube. But it's a function of that. People need clicks, and it's kind of drives the news cycle, as opposed to working at like a reporter, going to the gyms and letting things naturally take their course.
Yeah, the media gave this legs, and they kind of propagated it more than it needed to be propagated. Probably that's pretty evident. So
The same way that they move the goalposts for Jake Paul, guy doesn't have to have a weight class. Doesn't matter how old or how out of whack his opponent is. He can allegedly have Memo Heredia in his camp. Nobody ever asks him about drug testing. That's for sure.
But that goes back to my question. People are concerned about the PEDs, but are they concerned about Jake Paul fighting guys in their late 40s?
Right.
That's a bigger issue, in my opinion. But let's move on to the another fight that we just.
You didn't give your opinion on who was to blame.
Oh, and this thing.
Yeah.
Well,
He's trying to sneak the back door.
You want to hear my opinion on this? Okay. I think Tyson Fury wanted to fight a stay busy fight, and he knew that people weren't going to be happy with it. So he said, I'm going to send this ridiculous deal over to AJ that I know he's going to say no to. So then I could turn around and say, well, I'm only fighting this guy because AJ said no. That's what I think that's what I think Fury's plan was. And I think Joshua did really want the fight, and he did agree to everything. But I do believe that probably 258, his management team, and Eddie Hearn talked him out of it. That's why I believe they were stalling it. So this was kind of like I don't think Fury believed that Joshua was going to call his bluff. And when he did call his bluff, he kept putting pressure on him. He constantly tried to make it so Joshua would not be able to fight him. In other words, by putting the deadlines, he went out of his way to make it more and more difficult to make Joshua accept this fight. So then he could turn around and Joshua's a coward. Joshua's this, Joshua's that. Don't blame me for fighting this guy that you don't want me to fight. Blame Joshua. So now the reason why he's sending contracts to all these guys is I think he's putting out feelers because he heard all the negative backlash about the Char fight. So Char's kind of off the table now. So now they're looking at Chisora, right, for the trilogy. But now I even heard Andrew Ruiz's name was mentioned as well. So this is all just trying to get a feel for the media, but this is all a PR stunt. Tyson Fury's an attention seeker. That's pretty evident, I don't think he has mental health problems. I think he's just an attention seeker. I really do. I'll touch briefly on this. We hear a lot of these fighters come out and claim they have mental health issues. They're suffering from depression. Only one fighter that I've ever known really was diagnosed, and that was Mike Tyson, who actually came to this state, went to the Mayo Clinic, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, does have did see a doctor. Are these other fighters coming out and they have medical records? Are they going to doctors? Are they going to therapy? Have they been diagnosed with a specific clinical disorder, mental disorder? I don't believe so. So I mean, I think that's another thing we need to look at too. Like any fighter can just come out and say I'm suffering from depression, but are they really suffering? Are they depressed or are they suffering from clinical depression? Because there's two different things. Yes. My dad suffered from anxiety, and he has the medical. He had the medical records. May he rest in peace. He was diagnosed. He had to take medication, whatever. So it's a process. If you do have an issue, you need to be diagnosed. And if you're not being diagnosed and you're just diagnosing yourself and people are just going to run with that, then it is what it is. So I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that, but if not, let's move on to this next topic. Another fight that we just keep getting dangled in front of us like a carrot is this Crawford Spence fight. So is it on? Is it off? But if they don't fight each other, the question I have for the panel is, who would you like to see them fight if they can't get that fight done? Gabe, we'll go right back to you. Who would you like to see Crawford and Spence fight if they're not going to fight each other?
Wow, that's come back to me. Well, I don't know, maybe Bruce Dennis versus Crawford. I'll take that. Spence, I mean, I think if he doesn't fight Crawford, he'd have a mandatory, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure who that is. I'd have to pull up the rankings, and I don't know if people want to watch me do that.
Tough question. All right.
Stanley Jonas is mandatory with the WBA.
That's a tough fight. That would be a tough fight for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite fighter held the IBF belt. Tito Trinidad, 15 defenses, 7.5 years. I'd like to, when he took on his mandatories, tough dudes. I think Yuriboy Campos was a mandatory, wasn't he? 56-0, 50 knockouts at the time. So yeah, take on Staniosis, get that done. But I mean, it's just speaks to the other big problem about boxing, that if this fight doesn't get done, it needs to become a league. The fighters need to unionize. Fights need to happen in a timely fashion, because that's really the sport will never die. But good Lord, Matt, if you can't deliver that fight, I think we've proven that it wasn't Bob Arum's fault that this fight didn't happen. And I think Crawford has got a big case of watch what you wish for, because look at him now facing up to a big time promoter all by himself.
He's a man without an island. He's a man. He's a man.
Yeah.
On an island to himself, really.
Yeah. So hasn't fought. He won't. If they do it in February, it'll be like 15 months out of the ring. At his age, I mean, the fight's kind of turning into a Bradley Alexander in a weird way. Just weird long layoff and like just odd timing.
Do you think ego got the best of Crawford? Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know him well enough to answer that question. He's always reminded me of. It seems like a poker player. Keeps it close to the vest and like a good one. Yeah. But maybe I think somebody got in his ear, or I don't know. But I think he just made a bad move.
That's a tough one. Base, who do you think they should fight next, and who do you think they will fight next if they don't fight each other?
Okay, so who they should fight next? Terence Crawford should fight Virgil Ortiz because he's the #1 in the WBO, and Errol Spence should fight Boots because he's the #1 in the IBF, and he hasn't made a mandatory defense in the IBF since 2018. So that's definitely the next one in his rotation. But who do I think they're gonna fight next? I will not be surprised if Spence fights Keith Thurman, seeing as he's mysteriously #1 in the WBC rankings all of a sudden. So yeah, that will be Errol Spence's next fight. In terms of Crawford, I don't actually know who his next fight would be. It probably will end up being some kind of mandatory. It will probably end up being Virgil Ortiz, just because that's the next guy, and that's not necessarily a fight that's going to be super difficult to make. He's a free agent at the moment. Whether he wants to do mandatory defense, obviously he wants undisputed, then he wants undisputed again at 154. But yeah, I think he'll fight Ortiz, and I think Spence is going to fight Keith Thurman.
I got you. Lukey, same question to you. Who do you think they will fight next, and who would you like to see them fight next if they don't fight each other?
I mean, I think that what I'm expecting and what I want are two different things. That's like the age-old boxing thing. If they don't fight, I'm expecting Spence to fight Stanionis and go the mandatory route. For Spence, I'd like to see an all-Texas fight. If he doesn't fight Crawford, I'd like to see him in with Virgil Ortiz. I believe there's a storyline that they started at the same gym. That's two Texas people. That's an interesting fight to me. For Crawford, I mean, technically Ortiz is the #1 guy, but I'm looking at a guy like Keith Thurman would probably be the guy there. I'd personally like to see Boots Ennis. He's one of my favorite guys. The name that kind of scares me with Terrence Crawford is a guy named Cody Crowley, who's coming off a Josecito Lopez win. That is a guy that doesn't have a fight booked yet. And those are the type of fighters that could end up in a fight with a Keith Thurman. Another name that no one's bringing up is Mario Barrios, my buddy, my guy. He can jump into these, right? Pay-per-view ready names, So that's kind of like the plethora of names I'm looking at. I'm more concerned for who Terrence would fight than Spence.
He doesn't like that one. He doesn't like the Barrios fight.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about Barrios, but hey, make to each his own. Easy Raw. Who do you think they should fight, and who do you think they will end up fighting?
I want to say this right now, and I want to put this. I think the fight's going to happen. I think it's just getting pushed off, and they're going to work it out, and it'll happen. I think if any time's going to happen, it's going to happen now. But if it doesn't happen, I want to see Errol Spence move up and fight Charlo. I think I'm done. All the names we named at 147, I really have no interest anymore. Stanionis does absolutely nothing for me. Okay, that does nothing for me. Boots would be very interesting. I don't know what it gets Spence if he wins it, because everybody would just say that Boots was overhyped and overrated and never earned it and never got to that point. So it really doesn't do anything for him if he wins that fight. It's a very tough fight to win. I think if he goes and fights Charlo, I think that's the most interesting fight, undisputed at 154 pounds. I think if Crawford
trainer, so that won't happen.
But they said that they would fight each other. That they have been in interviews saying that they would fight each other. Spence has said it too, that he would fight him. I think that can easily be worked out with the right money. Because remember, Charlo needs to get paid, and he's getting towards, he's at the top of his thing right now. He needs to get the paydays. That'd be a massive fight for him. I think that Crawford and Thurman is the right move. Virgil Ortiz is a good move too for him. Those are all tough fights. I think the Ortiz is a much tougher fight, especially where Thurman is right now. But yeah, I would think Thurman would make a lot of sense. But I think the fight's going to happen. And I think that if the fight doesn't happen, not only is that what I want, I think that's what would happen. That's the way it would go.
Yeah. D-Style, same question to you. Who do you think they should fight, and who do you want them to fight?
I think it's very, very simple. I think the answer is right in our face. Look, if they don't fight, right, they got to give these young guys their shot, right? What it does for Spence doesn't matter to me. I'm a boxing fan. I want to see them test themselves against the young, up-and-coming Lions is what I want to see. Because I'm seeing other divisions. You see Bam Rodriguez got his shot. He beat two veterans of the sport. He beat Rungazai, and you know what I mean? So it is what it is. Shakur got his shot. I saw him get his shot. I keep seeing before him, Valdez got his shot. I'm seeing all these young guys. Teofimo Lopez got his shot against who many consider number one pound for pound Lomachenko. I see Devin Haney got his shot. I'm seeing all these young guys get their shot. But at welterweight, the train ain't moving. Nobody's putting coal in this train, and it's not moving. So now we're seeing these young guys that should have already gotten their shot not get their shot because these dudes won't fight. I don't understand what they're waiting for, right? They're delusional if they think their fight is at anywhere near the level of a Manny Pacquiao Mayweather. That's number one, right? So I don't know what they're trying to marinate, okay? Like marinate. I think we've done enough marinating to kind of get the damn fight going, right? Crawford has some soul searching to do. He sat there in front of an old Bob Arum and he said, well, I'm going to leave Top Rank because he couldn't deliver me the Errol Spence fight. Arum cannot force Spence to fight you. It doesn't matter what he cannot like physically grab Errol Spence and put him in the ring for you. He can't do that, right? Errol Spence needs to want to fight you. And I hate to say this because I don't really like saying this about fighters. I don't think Errol Spence wants that fight. You know why I know that? Because when Mikey Garcia called him out, he quickly made that fight. Hey, why are you fighting little Mikey Garcia moving up? Oh, he called me out, so I had to do it. Well, Crawford's been calling you out. You know what I mean? You would fight him? All right, so like all I know is if you don't fight him, it's time for Virgil to get a shot. It's time for Boots to get the shot. I don't want to hear boxing fans tell me, oh, they're not ready. Don't worry if they're ready or not. That's not our problem. I just want to, the boxing is an experiment, right? We have to see the experiment happen because at the end of the day, just think about it. Have you been right about everything? Have all your predictions been correct? Have you been right about every fight you ever predicted? No, right? So we don't know what's going to happen. So regardless of what we think, we got to make these fights happen. You don't think like, will Virgil ever be ready for a Crawford? I don't know, right? All I know is that you got to put him in the ring, and then we got to do the experiment, and we'll find out, right? And if he loses, guess what? Like a lot of fighters, Canelo wasn't ready for a Floyd Mayweather, but he took it as a learning experience. Look at where he's now, right? So I want to see these fights happen. Now, I do love the fact that if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to fight these guys, I mean, I wouldn't object to Errol Spence moving up to fighting, Jermall Charlo, but Jermall Charlo's got a date with Tim Tszyu, and that's not a given. I'm just going to tell everybody right now, right? So before people just like this, people are just brushing off Tim Tszyu like it's nothing, while people were brushing off Costas Tszyu before the Zav Judah fight. All right, so let's just wait for that. That's all I got to say about that one.
Got you. Yeah, I'm with Easy Raw. I think the fight will happen next. I don't think it's going to happen in November. I suspect maybe it'll happen in the first half of next year. I think because everyone's so silent, and you're hearing a lot of people come out with, oh, it's close, but you're not hearing much from the fighters. So the fighters have stayed off social media, in terms of talking about the fight itself. They're on social media still, but they're not really talking about each other. There's no back and forth. There's no really negotiating over the internet. So that's how I feel that there's really some quality work going on behind the scenes. And I do think the fight will happen. It's just not going to happen when we want it to happen. It's going to take a little bit longer than we wanted it to. But if it doesn't happen, what I do think will happen is I do feel Spence would probably fight Thurman. And I do think that Crawford would fight Virgil Ortiz. I do see that as a very plausible scenario playing out, if I'm being honest. So yeah, but if we don't get this fight, then this will just be one blow after another blow, because we seem to be talking more about fights not happening than the fights happening. Right? This whole show has been about fights that haven't happened. We haven't broke down one fight that is going to happen, right? We're talking about what isn't. So this is the Debbie Downers of boxing podcast right now. It's horrible. So this is a very interesting topic, and I'm curious to hear what everyone says on this. A lot of times when a fighter moves up in weight, we always look at it as him taking on the bigger challenge, having it more of a difficult task for him as opposed to the guy that's already at that weight class, right? But history has shown us that over the years, when we've had these guys moving up in weight, right? Even these catchweight bouts, more often than not, the smaller guy has won. Leonard beat Hagler, Duran beat Leonard, Hopkins beat Tarver. I had to write some of these down because I wanted to make sure I had a big list. I'm going to give you guys some ammunition to work off of here. Pacquiao, De La Hoya, Spinks, Holmes, Leonard Leilon, Mayweather, De La Hoya, Mayweather, Cotto Martinez, Bellew, Hay, Jones, Ruiz, Usyk, Joshua, Pacquiao, Hatton, and the list goes on and on. The women's fights. Rankin, Harper beat Rankin recently. Jonas beat Namus recently. Crawford moved up and beat Hearn. Canelo moved up and beat Kovalev. So history has shown us that the smaller men come out on top in a lot of these situations. So the question I have for the panel is, what is the most impressive win from a small guy moving up and beating the bigger guy in boxing history, in your opinion? D-Style, I'll go with you first.
Man. Look, there's a lot of them, but the one that comes to mind, at least one that I witnessed live, and hindsight's 2020, and I'll admit there is a hindsight to it, but let me put hindsight aside. Let me go by the real time when I saw it. I thought De La Hoya Pacquiao was a joke. I criticized the fight. I thought it was stupid, and then I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what the hell I was watching. Or like a real time. And even during the fight, I was still expecting De La Hoya to land like a left hook and knock him out. And like it never came. And then when he finally landed, like it did nothing to Pacquiao, right? So when I watched that fight, I remember I watched it with family. We were just like this watching the fight. We were just like it was, we couldn't believe what we were seeing. Like we just couldn't believe it. And unless you were there, unless you were a boxing fan at that time, unless you saw the buildup, I remember when this fight was just being teased, I thought it was stupid. I was like, what the hell are you doing? You're going to fight Pacquiao? Like, fight Margarito, dude. Like fight Cotto or something. What are you doing? Fight Mosey again, at least, or something, right? And he was going to fight Pacquiao, and hey, some people might say it was cherry picking gone wrong. You can say whatever you want, but it did not go De La Hoya's way. De La Hoya got embarrassed in that fight. He got annihilated in that fight, and I believe he quit on a stool, or Nacho stopped it, or whatever it is. The same round that he made Chavez, retire on the stool. So retire on the stool is a more respectful way of saying it, but to me, as far as what I witnessed, that would be the fight.
Pacquiao, De La Hoya.
Yeah.
Okay. Easy Raw.
I love the Pacquiao De La Hoya pick. I was thinking that one too. The one that I'm thinking right now is Tarver Hopkins. Hopkins coming off 2 losses at middleweight. People probably thought he was done in his career at that point. And he goes to fight Antonio Tarver at 175 and gets the W in dominating fashion, honestly. Another one that I was thinking of too that just happened recently, Usyk versus Joshua. I think that some people had Usyk because he was a pound for pound talent, but I think a lot of people had a question whether he was going to be able to stay in there with a top heavyweight guy like that. And he was impressive in it.
Gotcha. Gabe, what's yours? You're on mute, brother.
I'm on mute because I'm stumped, man.
Are you stumped? That's a tough one for you?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. That all the good ones have been taken. But maybe Pacquiao Cotto, because I think we were all just. I remember I was a boxing writer at that time. I was there for Pacquiao De La Hoya, which I didn't have the best media seat. I was like, I think row 12 or 15. So the fight was just like this whirling dervish moving around a very slow De La Hoya. It was just getting hit from all angles. It was an atmosphere unlike anything I've seen. But Pacquiao's rise, like I was there for Diaz. That fight was, again, incredible. But I think, the Cotto fight, it just seemed with De La Hoya, you could go, he looked overtrained. He looked terrible. I remember seeing him at Big Bear, and he was pale with a black eye. And they lied about who gave it to him. They said it was Victor Ortiz, but it was Edwin Valero, actually. I remember I was with somebody, I think it was with Steve and or another writer, John Novoselic, and they ran into him. There was Steve Kim that said it, and that Valero had bet a bunch of money on Pacquiao before the fight. He ran into him because he was the one that gave him the black eye, and that De La Hoya was running like an old man. And he was like always down the hill when everybody was at the top, and Valero got kicked out of camp because he's just beating shit out of De La Hoya. That one we could justify, but when he beat Cotto, it just seemed kind of unreal. How fast he was. I remember watching them both train and thinking Cotto was just going to be too much for him. So I'll go with that. I know I was a fool because once you get in there, the speed with which Pacquiao attacked him, it was dude was just peaking, and so I'll go with that.
I don't think you were a fool. I think there was a good amount of people picking Cotto for that fight too, because Cotto was a legend. You know what I mean? So did you actually pick Cotto to win that fight, or you thought he could?
I did. I remember telling somebody in the gym, Peter Nelson, who then was just a writer and ended up becoming head of HBO and then getting fired after all boxing fans turned against him. But that dude was like writing Freddie Roach's biography at the time. And he asked me, and I remember watching Cotto, and like the things that I thought Cotto would do well ended up being the things that were horrible. Like his uppercut just left him so wide open. So yeah, I don't know. I just got him. You can't win them all.
Yeah, I got you. Lukey, who's your pick for the best little man?
I love the question. So I wrote down a few while we were sitting here. So I got to go with my good friend who's he's in a nursing home right now, but shout out King's Gym, OG Bobby Warren. He'd be mad if I didn't mention one of his favorite fighters, Ezra Charles. He beat Jersey Joe Wilcock, moving up to heavyweight. So shout out OG Bobby, because he'd be mad if we didn't mention that. I think obviously Jones versus Ruiz, that was a terrible fight, but there was a lot of intrigue about that. Tommy Herms versus Virgil Hill. At least for me, that was a fight where Tommy moved up a lot of weight. And another one that stands out for me is Holyfield Tyson. That was a guy coming from cruiserweight up to heavyweight. That's one that I feel like was a little guy going up. My personal favorite was already said. Bernard Hopkins is my favorite fighter of my life. So when he beat Tarver, and that was quote unquote supposed to be the end of his career, that was a cool moment. And the thing I like about Bernard is when guys got their signature win over B-Hop, whether it was Jermaine Taylor, Chad Dawson, Sergey Kovalev, it like destroyed their career. Even Joe Smith to that extent. No one ever really got a positive reaction from beating even Calzaghe, just retired, basically. Like no one somehow was able to make a name off of Bernard Hopkins. They somehow got, even by winning, they kind of had a weird career after that. So I personally like the Tarver Hopkins fight in terms of this.
Gotcha. Base, what's your favorite little man, big man fight?
So this one was actually this is a little kind of bit outside my wheelhouse. I know, I know my history to a degree, but this isn't necessarily, where my talent lies within the game. That being said, I was wondering if it was a case of, is it someone that was like historically a lighter person, so that they could have had 2 or 3 fights at that weight and then fought the person, or is it they just went straight up to fight them? Because that would make it a much different conversation. But I did have 3 that I sort of picked out for myself. And one of them, you might say, well, it wasn't that hard of a challenge, but it was still moving up in weight. So the first one is Roy Jones Jr. against James Toney when he came up from middle to super middle. And, dominated in fashion, had Tony down in the 3rd round. I think that was, just cementing his greatness from early. Other one, I think, is, to me, it has to be kind of in there, is Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler. Just because, yep, my guy. I mean, Marv's the guy, but 3 years out the ring, coming from 147 up to 160 and winning. Wasn't a dominant performance, but like gritted it out, showed that the little guy, had the goods to beat the big guy. And the last one, which may be a little bit controversial, to be honest, because you could say one of them was way towards the back end of their peak, but then James Toney against Evander Holyfield, moving up from cruiser to heavyweight after coming, all the way up from middle to super middle, all that way, and beating, for the title. So those are the 3 that I had, because they were, and especially because they were direct. It was one weight class straight to the next into that fight. There wasn't any gimme fights or warm ups in between.
Excellent picks. You took one of mine.
Sorry,
and I'm biased. That's fine. I thought I was going to be the only one to mention this one because I'm biased as hell. Everyone knows Sugar Ray Leonard's my favorite fighter of all time. I love the guy. But I'm gonna say Leonard Hagler, man, coming off the 3-year layoff. I interviewed Ray, and he actually told me that I don't think it was that fight. I think it was when he fought Donny Leilon, when he fought for the 2 titles. Yeah, that's another one too that I love. I love that Leonard did. I didn't agree with the 2 titles being on the line in the same night. I didn't think that was fair to Leilon. I thought maybe just the light heavyweight title or just the super middleweight title should have been on the line and not the light heavyweight title. If the guy has to come in at 168, then why are you making him put us on it? So I didn't agree with that, even though I'm a Leonard homer. But he actually told me for that fight, he put like rolls of quarters in his trunks when he got on the scale, so he could weigh more than he actually did. So I think he weighed in at like 162 for that fight, fighting Donny Leilon. I mean, like he was under the weight. So that was crazy. That's crazy. So I want to circle back.
By the way, Duran Barkley is another one of mine that I like.
That was another great too. That was another great too.
You got to throw in Duran Leonard as well, the greatest lightweight ever, coming up. But
that's right.
G-Style, you threw in. I got to turn in my Felix Trinidad fan club card because I didn't mention Trinidad Joppy, which is just insane.
Yeah.
Power carried all the way up to 160.
Look, the way he dominated Joppy, a natural middleweight that way, it made him a big favorite going into the Hopkins fight. And I think people could look you had to live it. Like you had to be there to understand how big of an upset that was. You know what I mean? But that was something.
That was impressive. Is Trinidad your favorite fighter, Gabe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
I like Trinidad too. Trinidad's a good fighter, man. He's
yeah,
very
that
good.
run from De La Hoya all the way to Hopkins is one of the great runs of just him running through 154, having that classic with Fernando Vargas, and then coming up dominating Joppy, and then
Reed, don't forget Reed.
oh yeah, and Reed, yeah, and then the brick wall that is Bernard Hopkins. Brutal fight. Only seen it once. We'll only see it once.
Yeah. So we're gonna circle back to Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank. I want to talk about a statement that Eddie Hearn made. He said that this would be the biggest fight in UK history. I know promoters are supposed to say things like that, but was this one a little bit over the top? Was this a hyperbolic statement, or could he have been right here? If this fight took place, would this have been the biggest fight in UK history? Base, I got to go with you. Was there more buzz for this fight than an Anthony Joshua fight?
Well, I think he actually said it's the biggest fight he's ever promoted.
Oh yeah, excuse me. The biggest
Yeah.
fight.
Now
And then
that would be correct. That is definitely is the biggest fight he ever promoted, because there's just way too much history within obviously the country and the culture. Like everyone and their mom and their grandma knows, like, both, Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr. Where even outside of just boxing, just because they've been on other different platforms and shows. Senior especially, he had his own TV show on Channel 4 over here, like after his boxing career was done. So yeah, so all of that, and then mixing that in with like the sons, and then hopefully getting the dads involved in the whole process, that definitely would have been the biggest thing, even though it wasn't a Wembley show or a Cardiff show or whatever. But in terms of, is it the biggest fight in British history, that one I probably would say no. I think maybe the biggest fight would have been Lennox Lewis and Frank Bruno. That
Frank
probably
Bruno?
that probably would have been like the biggest one, or maybe even funny enough, Frotch Groves too, because that there was a lot that went into that. Everyone knew about that fight, not just the boxing public. But yeah, probably maybe I would say maybe Holy Lennox Lewis and Bruno, but it was up there, because but I don't know if it would have necessarily been bigger than the dad's second fight in terms of the hype. But in the modern era, yeah, I could definitely say, yeah, it's probably the biggest fight in recent memory, definitely, and it definitely is the biggest fight he's promoted, or the biggest spectacle.
So this fight would be bigger than AJ's fights, then, is what you're saying?
Yeah, because AJ's fights is ultimately it's just the sort of the big, good-looking heavyweight that's fighting an opponent. It's just a bit of a spectacle. Casuals will come out or whatever, but AJ's fights have no history. Like this is just who he's fighting next. Whereas this is just a big thing that's 30 plus years in the making, from the first father's fight to the second one to now.
So this fight checks all the boxes, in other words.
Pretty much.
Gotcha. Let me just shout out this super
Didn't
chat.
they have like 1.2 million people watch the weigh-in or something like that? It was like some crazy number.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an indicator.
And there was about 20 million people that watched, actually, like sat down and watched the fight across the world for the second one, I think. So
Wow. So Ricky Ricardo says, salute us off topic, but Fundora is a taller Paul Williams considering their weight and height. Thoughts on Fundora and his potential at 154 and up. I love Fundora, man. I think he has a lot of potential. And the thing about him is I just think he's just very coordinated. Usually a guy that's tall like that, they can't fight very well on the inside, but he's got a lot of versatility to him. He can punch, he's got stamina. People criticize his defense, but again, if you're constantly on offense and you're constantly, fighting at that pace that he fights at, you're forcing your opponent to keep his hands at home trying to defend you. So sometimes, in a case like that, the best defense is a good offense, because this guy is like a blanket when he's like a swarm of bees on top of you, man. So it is what it is. Gabe, where do you think this fight ranks in UK history? I mean, obviously we're not from the UK, but let's just from the buzz that we've been hearing, do you think we're getting more buzz from this fight than an Anthony Joshua fight?
The Ben Eubank Jr.
Yes.
I'm not a historian. I'm a drug guy, but and a contemporary boxing writer. But it's definitely was up there. Like I think Bay said it perfectly. It was like, how many fights can you get that are like 30 years in the making that have bad blood between these two fighters, and then their kids turn out to be viable fighters with some skill and are going to bring it. And then on top of that, the weight differential that they're willing to risk and sacrifice to make the fight. Apparently they're willing to do Clomid to do the fight. So it was pretty big. Maybe some pharmaceutical company can sponsor it next time out.
D-Style, what are your thoughts on this fight? Do you think it's the biggest fight in UK history, or had the potential to be the biggest fight?
Or like I think that Eddie Hearn promoted it, probably. But maybe I don't know if he meant it this way. Like maybe the biggest all British like main event, like all British main event, something like that. But I still think that the biggest event he was ever involved in the UK was Anthony Joshua against Vladimir Klitschko. I think that fight was the biggest event he ever promoted, in my opinion. Right, but obviously, Klitschko is Ukrainian, so I'm not exactly sure how Eddie Hearn meant it, but I'll tell you this: I don't have the algorithms in front of me that Eddie Hearn has. I don't have the numbers in front of me like he does. So maybe he knew something I don't know. Maybe he knew, like in the UK, this fight was going to do even better numbers than that. So you never know.
Gotcha. Easy Raw, where do you think this fight ranks in UK history?
See, I'm not an expert on this, so I'll defer to Base on this because I feel like he's more there. He knows better feel for it. But I will say this though, I do love how that sounds on paper. I'll tell you right now, that's a promoter being a promoter right there. Because doesn't that sound good? It feels good coming out. It feels good me saying it. Biggest fight in British history. That feels good. So that's a promoter being a promoter doing the right thing. But I have no idea. I feel like Anthony Joshua fights are a lot bigger just from where I'm standing. Anthony Joshua fights feel a lot bigger. This was very interesting to me personally. I don't know, like a lot of fans in the US, like I'm boxing Twitter, which I'm on constantly. I don't feel like they had like that much buzz here. I think people were excited, interested in it, but they weren't like a Joshua fight. It didn't feel like a Joshua fight to me.
I wonder what the potential was, considering the platform that they were on, for it to be the biggest. What does biggest mean? Like, it's not going to be the most people. Live, just talking about subscribers and people signing up to watch it.
Well, no, because they also had it was basically cross-platform promoted, because the BBC were going to run the Born Rivals documentary today, ahead of the fight, and they did a deal with Virgin Media as well for you to be able to buy the pay-per-view via Virgin Media over here. So, and they've got the second highest subscriber count in the UK. So it wasn't just the DAZN app. So it was going across 3 different platforms. So there was very good chances it could have done the 1 million pay-per-view buyers or a bit more than that.
Oh wow! Okay, that's great info. All right.
Yeah, and sometimes, like from the outside, it's like this: like Chavez Jr., Canelo, like to anybody outside of Mexico was probably like whatever. Like Canelo's going to beat this dude up, but it was like a big deal in Mexico. Like it really was. Like it was a big deal. Like a lot of people watch it over there. So it is what it is.
Gotcha. Lukey, what are your thoughts on this fight in terms of UK history? Where do you think it ranks? And do you think Eddie Hearn is correct, or is he just being hyperbolic here?
I mean, doesn't matter. It's his job to sell a fight. And so everyone says when he says this, it makes him feel good. And it sounds like it's a very relevant fight. Numbers are numbers, right? When I look at the Financial Times, which is something I read often, it simply tells you what's going up and what's going down. So the simple way to look at it is, if the fight was held, just look at the numbers, because numbers don't lie. Now, are we adding in context, cultural relevancy? That could add something to it. But whenever I hear these statements, it takes a month. It takes seeing what comes from it. It it seems, how does this seep into British pop culture? How does this seep into the world at large? How does this seep into fiction? How does this seep into music, other sports? Because for me to be the biggest fight in British history, it has to overlap some of my other interests and kind of affect the world. So I don't know if it would have done that. That's something I monitor over time. It was a fight I was excited about just because it was unique. It was entertaining and unique. And I was just seeing, it felt very flawed from the start. It felt like greed was kind of the primary focus of it. But at the same time, I wanted to see the train wreck every step of the way.
Yeah, gotcha. Gabe, you touched on this earlier, and this was already in the topics, and I kind of want to revisit this. What a couple weeks ago, Chris Eubank Senior was telling people to boycott the fight between his son and Conor Benn, and now it's coming out. People are kind of tying it into the whole drug test thing, but initially he said it was because of the weight cut. He was concerned about that. Do you think it was appropriate for Chris Eubank Sr. to come out and tell people to boycott his son's fight? And obviously, it was an emotional response because he already had lost a son. Do you think that this was tied into the whole PED test because everyone knew, everyone involved in the fight knew 2 weeks, 2 weeks prior, right around the time that he made that statement, that Conor Benn tested positive. So do you think that it was because of that? And do you think it was fine? Do you have a problem with him coming out and saying that, or do you think he should have kind of just let the whole process play out?
I don't have a problem with a father being, caring about his son. But I think somebody needs to get a hold of him and do that interview. I do think that's why he did it, but it was kind of like letting a release valve go a little bit. I'm gonna talk about this thing over here because the weight's related. His son making a weight he hasn't really made before is going to dehydrate him in a way that's going to put his brain at risk. And his father knows that. And so it's his way of kind of saying it without saying it is my opinion. And I think, absolutely. I think when it came out, it should have come out. Once he tested positive and everybody, the commissions or the governing, body and everybody knew about it, it should have just put it in place. Like I said before, there should be a mechanism that kicks in and the fight's on hold. Maybe that leads to promoters always having a good co-feature or, a third bout in there, the third bout out from the main that's in the same weight class so you could elevate somebody and work it out that way. This card shouldn't have been lost. To me, that's a mismanagement, and it kind of speaks to, maybe how weird the weight was from the get. Like Lukey said, it did seem to be a fight motivated by greed and with a real disregard for the safety of the fighters right out the gate. But, to Easy's point, what do you expect from flesh peddlers?
Yeah.
It doesn't excuse it, though. I just expect a lot out of the regulators, which they came through this time.
Yeah. Base, what are your thoughts on these comments? Do you think he knew all along? And do you have a problem with him coming out and telling people to boycott his son's fight?
I have absolutely no problem with him telling people to boycott the fight. That's his child. That's his choice. That's as much as I'll say on that particular part. There's if I had a child that was in a fight and I wasn't happy that they was going to be in it, I'd do the same thing. Like money or no money, because his life can't be replaced. Money can. Outside of that, I do actually think that him coming out now, obviously with everything we've heard, was tied to this adverse finding, whether it's factual or not, because in a lot of the interviews or a lot of the comments that he did make, he said things along the lines of, my son may not take you serious, Conor, but I take you serious. Like, I know what this means to you and your family. And maybe that's him saying, I know what you're actually willing to do to be able to win this fight. Now, that's just me speculating. Don't no one say he had, I'm just saying, based on the words he said, you could maybe infer that he was thinking, he was thinking that, okay, this has actually come out. oh, you're actually really serious about this. You want this more than anything, Chris. You're not taking this one seriously, or you don't appear to be. You're not in the best of strength, and you're going to be dehydrated. This fight must not take place. It can't take place. And then obviously he put out the letter that he sent to Spencer Fearon and Tunde Ajayi on The Fight Is Right, saying, you know, for everyone to boycott. So he's been vehemently like trying to get this stopped for the last couple of weeks. Now, obviously, Eddie Hearn came out and said, oh, well, you know, he just kind of been a bit stubborn just because it wasn't the event how he wanted it. But now with all of this other evidence, you would have to suggest he would have known in a similar sort of time frame as Junior knew and that team, because Junior's not going to not tell him. And that's just his way of, you know, maybe he was, you know, you're sworn to secrecy. There's an NDA in place. Like if you say something, you get sued or whatever. So in order to not get sued, you go around the houses, but you still say this fight can't go ahead. It can't go ahead. It needs to be boycotted. So yeah, I do think it was tied to it now. And in, like I said, in terms of whether he should have or whether he had the right to, 100%.
Got you. Easy, Raw. What are your thoughts on the comments? And obviously, you can make a plausible conclusion that maybe it was tied to this PED test.
Honestly, I think if he knew the PED test, he would have said it. He likes to talk. We and him have the same problem. We like to talk a lot. And if you give me some information like that, and especially the way he talks, he would have said it in some poetic way that it would have brought us a PED thing. I don't believe that he knew that. I think he just was. I think he likes the attention. I think he maybe wasn't happy about the fight, the weight cut. That makes sense. The weight cut's the most dangerous part to me in this whole thing is the weight cut. You don't know how that guy's going to react to the weight cut and how drained he's going to be and how if he's going to be able to take shots. I think that he was concerned about that. So I believe that. I don't know if he knew about the PED. I think if he knew that, he would drop a way bigger hint on that, because that's just the way, if you hear interviews he has and stuff like that, he's not a guy that is short for words, and he's not a guy that's not afraid to say something. So I doubt he knew that. Yeah.
Lukey, what are your thoughts on the comments? Do you think it was tied into the PED test?
I was looking for a prop. I was looking for a prop to do this whole thing. So it felt like foreshadowing. Like if you're watching a movie and they put the steaming pot and he was putting together something, he felt like something bad was coming. And we could sit up here and hypothesize whether he knew or he didn't. But it felt like he was laying the groundwork. If things didn't go well, look at this foreshadowing that I gave in front of this. And I'm not on board with what was happening. But we've seen this a lot. Chuck Liddell fought Tito Ortiz and his longtime coach wasn't in the corner. This type of stuff sometimes happens, and I always view it as kind of foreshadowing of the camp from hell. That's the way I interpret these type of things.
Gotcha. D-Star, what are your thoughts on the comments?
I just think he saw the writing on the wall. Look, catch weight. You got to weigh in at 157. Never weighed in at 157. Like, you know what I mean? Like, rehydration clause. It has to be a rehydration clause. Like the whole stack, it's on the main promoter is Conor Benn's promoter, Eddie Hearn. You know what I mean? It's on his card, under his watch. Okay. They're implementing like all this testing, which ended up actually working against them. But nonetheless, right? They have all this, they're stacking the deck against him, right? Using the whole, well, hey, you're the big guy. We got to make it even. We got to weaken you a little bit. We got to make we got to do what we got to do, right? I mean, what was next? Like, you have to tie a hat behind your back or what? Like, what? You got to wear weights on your wrists? Like, what was next?
That would be an awesome fight, though, if we get to a point where it's like, okay, here's a great fighter. You don't get your right hand, but you get to fight Jake Paul for an absurd amount of money, but you just get your left hand. And he can just hit you for one round in any part of your body. He can hit you low. I hear. Like that's where we're kind of trending.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, Canelo, he still wants to fight Usyk. Okay, well, like really? Yeah. I mean, what are you going to implement on Usyk? Because you ain't going to fight Usyk. You're not going to fight Usyk. You're going to fight. You're obviously going to want to catch weight. You're going to have a rehydration clause, and not even that's enough. So I don't know what the hell is going to have him do in order to get in the ring with them, right? So it's only a matter of time before they implement new shit, right? But yeah, I think that's what it was. It was just the father looking at the fact that you're not fighting my son at his optimum weight. Like, you're not fighting the best version of my son, right? And that's the reality. If you're going to move up in weight to fight somebody, move up in weight to fight somebody, right? If you're going to campaign as a middleweight, if that's what you want to do, then be a middleweight dude. You know what I mean? If you're not ready for middleweight, the middleweights are too big and strong, and the middleweights are just too much, then don't fight a middleweight. Like, thankfully, good for you. You have other divisions you can campaign at. You can campaign at welterweight. You can campaign at super welterweight. You don't have to be a middleweight, right? So I think that's what it was. I think he was concerned about his son giving up all his natural advantages to make it fair against this guy. Whether or not he knew about the steroid thing, I don't know, right? But if he did, that's just an added, that's just something else. You know what I mean? I mean, what's left at this point? Like, you're giving him weight, you're giving him a rehydration clause, he's PEDing. Well, what's left? Like I said, I mean, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but tying a hand behind his back, that's the only thing that's left at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of safety concerns, let alone just the PEDs, but it's the whole circumstances surrounding the fight were very, very dangerous if you really think about it. So we like I said, we spent the whole show talking about fights that aren't happening. Right, here's the fight. Let's cross our fingers that is going to happen. Could this fight? It's supposed to happen on December 3rd. Could this fight kind of save the day and close out the year in a positive note for boxing? And this is the Estrada, Chocolatito Gonzalez trilogy. Can this fight live up to the hype? Can it close out the year with a bang? Can it save the day for boxing? Start with you, Lukey.
I mean, we're going to always get great fights. And of course, this fight could be the one, but there's going to be great young fighters who are eager to make statements. And I'm looking like this weekend, we got Mike Fox versus Mean Machine. That's going to be a great fight. Then looking ahead, we got Michaela versus Alicia. We got Devin Haney, who's a rising star. We got Clarissa Savannah Marshall. Every week, we're going to get some great fights, and Chocolatito versus Estrada will be no exception. I'm excited to see when we get these fights and we get some of the best fighters in, evenly matched up, and people are hungry to be legends in the sport. I'm excited for in this final quarter. I know at least one person will become a legend or start their path to glory. And I think that's what keeps us excited as fight fans, is we don't want to miss in real time that moment where Tim Bradley becomes immortal, that moment where Andre Ward becomes a legend, that moment where a fighter goes from being a fighter that you watch to being like, I can't miss this guy. And honestly, with Fundora this weekend, I'm kind of hoping he's in a little bit harder fight, so maybe he can have that moment to transition into a capital G guy in the division.
Gotcha. Easy Raw. Will this be the ray of hope, a bright shining light at the end of the year for us?
I mean, I think it's a great fight. I'm excited for it. I think Estrada has shown maybe a little bit of slowing down a little bit. I think Chocolatito has. I think people thought his career was done a while back when he got knocked out, and then suddenly he's had this reign where he's back to being dominant again. And I think that he could have a great performance. Whether it's a great fight, we might get a great performance from a legend in Chocolatito and might set up another great fight. So I think there's going to be amazing storylines come out of these fights. A lot of times, we maybe don't get the great fight, we get a good storyline. I think this is going to be an excellent storyline after this fight. I think it's either going to be maybe the end of Chocolatito, right? If he can't beat Estrada, or if he beats Estrada and then just the being crowned again, being the top man again, when maybe years after when people thought he was on this downhill. So I think it's going to be excellent. I think I'm really excited for that fight. I think it's going to be a good story after it.
B-Style, could this be a fight of the year candidate? What do you think?
I think it is going to be the fight of the year. A lot of people are counting out Gallo Estrada, but look, I honestly believe he couldn't get up for his previous opponent. That's not an excuse for nothing, but I believe that. Look, he was offered an abysmal amount of money to fight Franco. That's why that fight didn't happen. I mean, like $120,000 after he gave everything in that second fight against Chocolatito, where they both threw a record-breaking amount of punches. He gave us an amazing fight, and yet you can't pay this dude. But now they're obviously he's getting paid. He's happy with what he's getting for this one. And I think he's coming for that W. I think he's going to win the trilogy. I think Gallo Estrada is going to prepare. Obviously, he has to. But I'm not counting Chocolatito out, man. Chocolatito is a hell of a talent. Rungasai knocked him out. I get it. But I had him on my channel, and he said, not him, but his trainer, that is. And he said, look, when he lost his trainer, he wasn't the same. You know what I mean? He just wasn't the same guy. He lost his trainer. He wasn't the same fighter. And now with his new trainer, that they have like a bond, and that's really important for fighters. And that's going to be a hell of a fight. Be ready for that fight. But I do believe Gallo's going to win. I'm going for Gallo Estrada. But it's going to be a fight of the year for sure.
Gotcha. Gabe, you excited for this fight?
Oh yeah, man. I can't wait for this fight. I was at the first fight there at the sports arena in LA, and I think that Gallo just wasn't quite at that level, and Gonzalez was just in the pocket, still in the pocket of greatness, but it was such a nip and tuck fight. I thought it was, that one scorecard, it was like 118, 110, 118, was just, I don't know what fight they were watching. It was a tough fight to score. I thought Chocolatito clearly won it at the, down the stretch. But since then, the fortunes have reversed, and I agree a lot with what D-Style said. Losing your trainer is a huge deal for a guy like that, and I think he just kind of lost his stride there for a minute. And also, I think styles make fights, and these two guys seem to be kind of made for each other. And now that I think Estrada was ascending, and now he's kind of leveled off a little bit, we might get the best fight out of the three. And they've been very good fights. So now I can't wait. Now I think it'll be a ray of hope. But to quote Larry Merchant, it's boxing. Nothing can kill it, and nothing can save it. It's just always going to go on. Just like going back to John L. Sullivan, there's always been some sort of sideshow element where he comes into town and I can lick any son of a bitch in the world, and anybody that can last, unless they're black, and then I won't fight them ever. And he put that in the parenthetical. But he would come to town and fight like, anybody for 4 rounds for, anybody that could last gets X amount of dollars. And, he was a heavyweight champion of the world doing that, barnstorming in a train. So there's always been a carnival side to this sport. But I digress. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the fight, and it's going to be a great closeout to the year. But I can't wait for next year with Wilder Helenius. I think that's going to give us more throws and spills than we are anticipating. Helenius is a dangerous dude. I think people have written him off, and I'm not picking him to win, but I'm certainly looking at the menu and the upset special.
Gotcha. Base, this is kind of interesting because now that the zone is available in the UK, you get to see fights like this where you normally probably wouldn't be able to see them. How excited are you about this fight and just being able to see these fights now that you have the zone?
Well, I mean, a lot of them, to be fair, we used to get on Box Nation, so especially like the little guys. That being said, yeah, we used to get quite a few of them. I was really excited for the second one. I think Chocolatito got screwed, and even in the fight against, or the fights against Rungvisai, I still feel like if he was judged properly in that first fight, because I think he won the first Rungvisai fight, he would have never got knocked out in the second one, and he could almost say he might still be undefeated as a fighter now. So I feel a bit bad for him. I also feel bad for the fact that he's fighting Estrada with no belts on the line, so there's nothing on the line in this fight, because the franchise title doesn't mean anything because it got stripped because he didn't fight Franco. And the WBA got stripped because he didn't fight Franco. And then because of his last fight wasn't the fight it was supposed to be, he doesn't even have the franchise belt anymore. So, it can't be transferred or whatever. So either way, they're fighting for nothing apart from just, I guess, the pride of the second fight. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like, not as much as I was the second one, but I'm looking forward to it. However, I just think it's going to be a one-sided beating. I literally think Chocolatito's going to dominate and possibly even stop Estrada in this one. He's been out of the ring for God knows how long, apart from obviously the comeback fight he just had a couple months ago. The turnaround for him at his age might not necessarily be the greatest, just over 3 months from his last fight up to this one. He had the long COVID, which is why he pulled out of the original trilogy fight several times previously, supposedly, if that was the reason why. I just don't really think he wanted to revisit this. I think he's kind of almost backed into a corner to have to. And yeah, I just think that Chocolatito is going to be more sort of more primed for this one. He's had a slightly longer rest than Estrada has, and obviously we saw what he done in his last fight. It was just pure domination. And so even there was a guy obviously coming up in weight and whatnot, but yeah, it was a one-sided pasting, and I literally think that he's on a mission to make that be the case again. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, but I think it might be one of his best performances, one of his swan song performances, but I do think it's not going to be that competitive.
Got you. All right. Well, that's another one in the books, guys. Great show, great panel. Thank you, everyone in the chat. Once again, make sure you check out Lukey's book. You can buy it on Amazon. The link is in the description box. Very good book. Lukey's an excellent writer, so make sure you guys give this.
My girlfriend's an excellent writer.
Okay, I'm sure
she edited it. So Emily's an excellent writer. I moonlighted Babib. I'm sending you a couple. D-Style sending you a couple. Shoot, I'll send out everyone on this thing a couple. Appreciate you guys. Buy the book. It means a lot. It goes into me filming fighters.
All right, guys. All right, peace out, everyone. Have a good one, man. Stay safe.
Take care.
Take care, guys.
All right, see you later.
All right, man. You're good.